in one of my favorite episodes of The Simpsons. Homer inadvertently finds himself in the midst of a hallucinatory vision quest after eating several Guatemalan insanity peppers at the annual Springfield Chili Cook-Off. And on his quest, he meets his spirit guide, a cynical coyote voiced by the late, great Johnny Cash. "There is a lesson you must learn," says the coyote. "I speak of a deeper wisdom." In response, Homer asks, "Well, what should I do? Should I get rid of all of my possessions?" To which the coyote replies, "Are you kidding? If anything, you should get more possessions. You don't even own a computer." So the topic of my sermon today is consumerism. And as many of you know, I often enjoy taking traditional views on topics and then subverting them. So I was really tempted to try and find a way to defend and promote the wisdom teachings of the Johnny Cash coyote. And broadly speaking, it can be argued that consumerism, to some degree, is a necessary and natural consequence of the birth and rise of the middle class, that it is a form of economic democracy in action, in which people cast their votes with their dollars, which in turn forces producers to listen and respond to the needs and the desires of the people. But I'm talking today of a far more narrow type of consumerism, the kind of consumerism that Eric Olin Wright and Joel Rogers define as the belief that personal well-being and happiness depend to a very large extent on personal consumption, particularly on the purchase of material goods, that at the center of happiness is consumption and material possessions. I'm talking about the kind of hyper-consumerism that Professor Amitai Etzioni refers to as an obsession with acquisition, and not to be confused with mere consumption. Consumption, per Etzioni, is the normal purchase of goods that satisfy basic human needs. Consumerism, on the other hand, Etzioni defines as a social disease in which one attempts to achieve self-actualization and satisfy high-order needs like affection and esteem through the acquiring of goods. So how do producers convince people to stop saving their money, which is a pretty good idea, and instead to spend their money on goods and services that they simply do not need? How do they create an artificial desire for the unnecessary? How are we tricked into believing that fulfillment and meaning and true happiness can be purchased? The answer is advertising. In America, in 2015, $187 billion was spent on advertising. Every year, the average American child sees over 25,000 ads on TV alone. The average American adult sees over 52,000 TV ads every year. So to put this another way, every year, the average American child spends a full week, 7 straight 24-hour days watching ads on TV. The average American adult every year spends 2 full weeks watching such ads. And these numbers don't include print, billboard, radio, or internet ads. I've spoken to individuals who have worked in the field of advertising, disgruntled individuals, I should say, for the sake of full disclosure, who in describing modern advertising have referred to it as a form of violence and psychological warfare against unwitting consumers. Advertising is really big business, and a great deal of money and time is spent by advertisers doing market research and applying principles of social psychology to understand exactly how best to manipulate hearts and minds. It is a science designed to consciously and subconsciously create desire in people and to sometimes convince people that a lie is truth. Now, I do not want to suggest that all advertising is inherently bad, far from it. A lot of valuable information is often communicated through ads. Moreover, I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to be persuasive. For example, I knowingly use rhetorical strategies when I preach in order to be as persuasive as possible. And whenever you argue with someone, you of course try to be persuasive, to convince them that you are obviously correct and they are always wrong. And isn't it amazing how that always seems to work that way? You are always right and they are always wrong. It's uncanny. But modern advertising in many ways is a different beast altogether. Here's an example of that. Advertisers know that children don't have buying power for themselves because children generally don't have their own money. Children purchase through their parents. A director of strategy for a large communication firm noted that according to their research, 20 to 40% of parental purchases are a direct result of a child nagging their parent. Moreover, the specific way that a child nags often determines whether the parent will in fact make the purchase. So instead of marketing products directly to parents, producers now market directly to children, and they strategically demonstrate in the commercial exactly how to nag the parent in order to get the best results. In other words, companies are actively and intentionally training your children how to most effectively nag you to optimize their chances of getting you to buy their product. Advertising is powerful. This year, nearly $200 billion will be spent by companies and corporations to make you believe that you can buy your way to happiness. We live now in a consumer culture where our personal value, our individual inherent worth and dignity has become proportional to our individual buying power. Artist Barbara Kruger captured and critiqued the spirit of our hyper-consumerist culture in a 1987 print parodizing Descartes' cogito ergo sum. But Kruger's version used the words, "I shop, therefore I am." Then in a brilliantly ironic meta-statement, or a breathtaking act of hypocrisy, Kruger's print was sold on t-shirts, posters, and shopping bags. I shop, therefore I am. It's an artist's critique. It's a funny joke, but it may also be frighteningly true. And producers and advertisers, they know it, and they're capitalizing on it. Perhaps the most brazen example of this smug self-awareness comes from a popular line of toys called Shopkins. Shopkins, that's the name. The characters are cute personifications of commodities that you buy at the store. These Shopkins live in a fictional world called Shopville. The primary action that occurs in this fictional landscape is the act of shopping. The tagline for the toys is, "Once you shop, you can't stop." So in other words, what has happened? For your children, if they nag you effectively, you can now shop for shopping. You can purchase purchasing. You can buy buying. Shopping itself has become a commodity, a glorified commodity, and the toy companies are laughing all the way to the bank. When Americans are taught from birth that our personal value is tied to our ability to spend and consume, that happiness and fulfillment can be bought, is it any wonder there is so much greed in the world today? I would venture to say that it's part of the reason why kids steal sneakers from each other. It's why banks and corporations are stealing from consumers and taxpayers. It's why so many Americans are literally killing themselves working long hours of overtime at multiple jobs. It's why the average American household currently carries over $15,000 in credit card debt. So you may be asking, why am I talking about this today? This would have been a good message before Black Friday, right? It's timely for me because this past week, I was driving in my car and I was listening to the radio. And as I was listening to the radio, an ad came on. It was from Nabisco, the company that makes all the snacks, Ritz crackers and such. Anyway, Nabisco is apparently celebrating its 115th anniversary this year, and they are marketing this with a campaign called 115 Moments of Joy. I don't recall the exact words from the ad, but the spokesman on the radio made this assertion. He said that by eating a Nabisco product, specifically one of their cookies, you could experience joy. Joy. Now, advertising, I know, is full of exaggeration and hyperbole. I know this. Nevertheless, I'll admit to you that I became irrationally angry sitting in my car as I heard this in my radio. I was absolutely furious. I actually began punching my steering wheel. I was at a stop, so it was safe, don't worry. And even though I was alone in the car, I began shouting to anyone who could hear me through the glass, "You can't get joy from a cookie!" Why was I so angry? Well, first, I may have been having a really bad day already. I can admit that. But secondarily, I think it was because I felt at that moment, I experienced and interpreted this advertisement kind of like an act of violence. It wasn't just that they were lying to me, but they were also degrading a word that actually means something to me. Joy is an important word. It's a sacred word. It represents, to me at least, a divine concept. It's not something to be trotted out in a marketing campaign to sell cookies. So how dare they lie to me and tell me that something so beautiful and rare and precious and sacred as joy can be purchased at Publix? The only thing worse is when they appropriate the word love. Revlon recently had a campaign about their makeup. The slogan was, "Love is on." And maybe you've heard this one recently. Love is what makes a Subaru a Subaru. And I actually like Subaru. And of course, from the McDonald's Corporation, I'm loving it. I'm reminded of Inigo Montoya's second best quote from The Princess Bride. "You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means." Advertisers have essentially co-opted some of our most important, our most sacred, our most spiritual words and the values they represent in order to sell their products, to make us think that self-actualization, fulfillment, true happiness, and ultimate meaning can all be ours if the price is right. But you can't get love from a car. You can't buy love from a clown selling a breakfast sandwich either. And you absolutely can't get joy from a cookie. Except when you can. So I guess that there was this one time where I can associate the word joy with a cookie. It was over 2 decades ago. I was a 16-year-old evangelical Christian. And for the summer, I went on a missions trip smuggling Bibles into Siberia. We spent about a month in Siberia, about 60 of us young people from all across the United States. We spent a lot of time roughing it, often camping in remote areas of the countryside, in and just outside of small villages, far from the comfort and amenities of our American homes. And then one day, my small group leader, he quietly grabbed me, and he grabbed the rest of our group, which included a couple other guys. And we were really curious about this sense of secrecy he had about him, but we didn't say anything. When we were a good distance away from the larger group, we finally asked him what was going on. "We're going to have communion together," he replied. And he pulled from his knapsack a packet of strawberry Kool-Aid and a Ziploc bag of Nabisco Oreo cookies. It was contraband that he had somehow sneaked in from home, and he had been holding on to it ever since we had all arrived in Russia. And now, he was going to share his secret stash with us. We almost cried in joy at the sight of it. He mixed the Kool-Aid with some water in his canteen, and then, as we salivated over the prospect of being reunited with the sweet, familiar taste of good old American junk food, he proceeded to serve us the body and blood of Christ. It tasted like home. And it was one of the most powerful communions I have ever received. That was a moment of joy, a moment of love. In short, it was church. The coming together of individuals, hearts full of love and gratitude, joyfully sacrificing and sharing with one another, and in the midst of us, however you may choose to define this term, in the midst of us was God. So what is the answer to the problem of hyper-consumerism? If we stop trying to buy our way to a full and meaningful life, what do we pursue instead? Professor Etzioni, whom I quoted earlier, gives two possible answers to that question: community and transcendence. In other words, working for the good of others and working on the self through spiritual reflection and contemplation. As I read his words, as I read his answers, I thought to myself, oh, you mean church? I like church people. I'm biased, I know. We church people, people of all denominations and faiths, we are a shrinking minority in America. Every year we lose more and more people, and I wonder if that is yet another symptom of our hyper-consumerist culture. I wonder if advertisers are using words like joy and happiness and love in their marketing schemes because there is such a great and desperate need for all those things in the world today, and people just can't find them elsewhere. And if that is the case, then frankly that means that the capital C church isn't doing its job. It's not fulfilling its mission. I'm here at UUCJ because I believe in the beauty and the transformative power of community. I'm here because I want my children to taste the good fruit of community before the 25,000 TV ads they're going to see this year trick them into believing that they can buy joy and love on their own. I'm here because I believe in the power of the spiritual quest and my need personally to keep learning and moving and changing and becoming all that I am capable of becoming, to become the most useful person I can become to serve a world in desperate need. That's why I'm a church person. And I suspect that's why you're a church person too. And that's why a broken, consumer-driven world needs a strong, mission-driven, spirit-filled church to bring healing and restoration, to remind and reorient us to the things that really matter. May we be that church. Blessed be.